Let's start off with what is your why? What is the reason that you do what you do?
Okay, since I'm closest to you, I guess I'll start. I am Eboné Lockett. I am the granddaughter of Cora and John, who are migrant and immigrant farmers. I am the daughter of Shirley and Charles, who were part of the migration, the Great Migration. So I was actually born in Hartford, Connecticut, and raised in New England. But when I think about my why, it always starts with my ancestors. It always starts with um, the Harvest of Shame. If you've ever watched that documentary, it was Amparo. John Amparo had done a documentary called The Harvest of Shame. And in that documentary, my family is featured there and their migrant journey. And if you fast forward, there's a newer version of it, still by the same name, but you'll see that it really focuses a lot on North Carolina. So, me coming to North Carolina in 2007 was part of my reverse migration. I had to come back home. I had to sit in the seat of my ancestors and figure out not only who I was, but whose I was and what my responsibility to this work and to food sovereignty is. And that is my why.
Thank you. My why is I'm a child of the civil rights movement era and certainly grew up, looking at the disparities that uh, encompass my community. And as a young adult, I happened to run into uh, leaders who were really on the forefront of social change in the community and happened to work for a program called the Senior Nutrition Program. And so, in driving that bus every day, I had 30 to 40 seniors, and I listened as I was driving to the stories that they told. And actually, going in and out of their homes, I actually saw the challenges that they faced. And so I bring a legacy with me as well. And it is the legacy that goes all the way back to the end of the Civil War with a donation of land from a free black man to a church. And from that church, the leaders of that church actually built homes, churches, and schools that define the progressive self help culture of the West Boulevard Neighborhood Coalition. So I bring their spirit and legacy into the room and into this discussion. And that's my why.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. My why, in full transparency, I didn't know that food insecurity was my why. When I moved to Charlotte, I've spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector, always working for a nonprofit that speaks to my heart. And truth be told, I was very worried that my job at Loaves and Fishes would be depressing. Feeding people day in and day out. I had come from a YMCA in Montana where mostly people come into the Y happy, get a good workout, or kids come to day camp and they leave happy. And so I thought, is feeding people going to be depressing work? And I was day 2, Beverly Howard took me to a pantry, our first ever pantry at Holy Comforter, and I got to watch a gentleman shop for food. And that gentleman walked into that pantry ashamed and embarrassed to be there, and 20 minutes later, he left with a grocery cart full of food, and he had had the most pleasant, loving interaction with one of our volunteers where he was allowed to shop for food, and they left hugging one another. He loaded up his car full of food, and it dawned on me in that moment that this work was not gonna be depressing at all. And, as a kid that grew up, using my free and reduced lunch ticket, and I remember watching my mom use food stamps at the checkout. We were a very food insecure family, but I didn't know it because my mom worked really hard to make sure that we always had food on our table. And, for our birthdays, we got to pick our favorite meal. And so in my house, as in probably most of your homes, food is love. When you're celebrating something, whether it be a holiday, a birthday, a graduation, we celebrate with food. And so that's what we do at Nourish Up is we get to feed people. We get to nourish people. So that's my why.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. We're gonna change a little bit, but we're gonna go into more of like the food insecurity. So, How has the push for healthier and fresher food access evolved, and why is it so crucial for addressing food insecurity in marginalized communities?
I'll tell you why. For the last 30 some odd years, um, the West Boulevard corridor has been without a grocery store. There are approximately 19,000 residents and 800 households within the corridor, and the only access to fresh, healthy food is a Walmart that's over a mile away. And there are $2 stores and several convenience stores. And let me not say the proliferation of arcades that create extractive wealth opportunities. So when you look at the access points, um, and the processed foods and things of that particular nature, when you look at the social determinants of health that actually in the corridor in comparison to, say, Mecklenburg County and specific zip codes, the prevalence of high blood pressure, heart, obesity, diabetes, strokes, all of that, um, of significantly higher than Mecklenburg County as a whole, and the specific geographic area we looked at 28204, all of those, and so the morbidity rate for residents in the corridor are extremely high, and it's due to the lack of access to fresh, healthy food. So we wanted to change that dynamic, and we created a course to do that back in 2016, and we're well on our way to accomplishing that goal.
So one of the things that you did not hear is that I am also the board chair of the Rosa Parks Farmers Market, which was started in partnership with elders on the West Historic West End and the Mecklenburg County Public Health Department. And the reason that I said yes to that appointment was because not only, again, that legacy that was always looming in the back of my mind, that I am responsible for not only what we eat, but how we eat and how we have access to not only healthy foods, but foods that nourish. And so when we think about the cumulative health impacts, when we think about the fact that I taught and many years the students would come in hungry, and I would make sure that I had fresh fruit. But their palates had already been poisoned by wanting and desiring Takis and donuts and the things. And I said, it's not enough for us to just make sure that our communities are fed. We have to really and truly be healing. We have to use food as medicine. And I think a lot of people are starting to see those intersections. A lot of people are starting to see how they can not only change their habits, change their moods, change their mindsets, but also change their health trajectories through food. When COVID hit, I had a stark realization. I was actually serving, you all do the meals. I was serving meals at the university, UNCC, and I was really struck by not only how many students didn't have access to healthy food, but I saw Ben's trucks rolling up for lunch. I saw, a lot of people had found themselves on the precipice of not being able to feed themselves. And that was another moment that I said, these are the hands that fed for many generations in my family. What can I do? And I just took on that role, and I've been occupying that role. And I'm ever so grateful to have leaders in this space who understand that it's not just enough that we provide food, but we got to teach people how to grow for themselves because we know our food is being contaminated. And that's the reality. If you look at things like the smell of money and what's happening to our hog farms and the way our foods are being produced, that matters just as much.
I think I would answer that question first statistically. So we survey all of our clients that we provide groceries to, and it is alarming that 68% of our clients that we surveyed report being diagnosed with one or more chronic diseases. So even though we fed over 160,000 people here in Mecklenburg County, I don't want to pat myself on the back too proudly if all we fed them was junk food. And so that's not our focus at Nourish. We need to make sure that not just that we're feeding people, because my staff who are in attendance can attest that we get enough Pop-Tarts and pastries donated that I could feed the world twice over. But that's not our intention, especially if people have been diagnosed with one or more chronic diseases. And so statistically, we have to do something better. anecdotally, we see it every day. I I have many board members and funders and staff members in the room tonight, and they've heard me share this story. But I was at a food share and I had a mother, I was loading up milk, apples, and oranges into the trunk of her car, and she burst into tears. And I said, "Oh my goodness, is everything all right?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just so excited." She said, "My kids wanted apples last week at the grocery store, and I had to tell them that we couldn't afford them. So they'll be so excited to see this fresh fruit." I have 3 children. They are never excited when I bring home fruit. And it's because fruit is plentiful in my household. So again, fresh food is a luxury item for people who struggle to afford groceries. And so we need to make fresh, healthy options accessible to people.
Thank you for that. Ebony, one thing that you mentioned was food as being healing. So I know that in your in Harvesting Humanities, you have an initiative called Cultivating Healing. Could you talk to us a little bit about how that got started and where it's at right now?
Um, yes. So in our organization, we reimagine research, learning, and personal and professional development through an arts inspired and arts transpired lens. And so, what that translates to mean is that we think about, again, across the social drivers of health. We can't talk about healing a whole person and not think about what they're eating, whether they're moving, getting up and moving, whether they're exercising, whether their mental state is well. All of those things play into whether or not we are healthy, whole, and well human beings and non-human beings. And so our organization really looks at it from a holistic perspective. We think about how do we engage young people in learning how to grow food, understanding where their food comes from, knowing how to eat the foods that are going to sustain them, but also that are going to make them feel better about themselves, make their health better. And that's really just, again, the holistic viewpoint that we take in our work.
All right. May I? Okay. Yes. We certainly come at it from a different direction, given the long history of, well, similar direction, because we also have an urban farm where we hire youth ages 14 to 17, um, and we teach them marketable skills and habits, and they learn to grow fresh, healthy fruit and vegetables that we actually serve in a farmer's market arrangement on site, and the kids actually become ambassadors for the program. That is our first foray into changing the offerings and food in the community. But we're coming at it too from this long history of seeking to attract traditional grocery stores to the corridor. And for decades, all of them have looked at our corridor, have expressed interest, but at the end of the day, we're still in the same boat that were in. And so in 2015, we said that we were tired of this. We were going to go after a cooperative grocery store because we had done our homework, and we've had 7 market studies and performance to date that validated, even all the way back 30 some odd years ago, that there was income sufficient enough to support a traditional market. They didn't come, but a cooperative presents an opportunity as well. And so we've plotted a course to do that. And so the Three Sisters market is where we are now to date to actually provide that in a full service arrangement. But we're doing it from the lens of a health equity model, because it's not just about providing the food, but it's the health and education that goes along with it, teaching people how to eat better, but also creating it in a partnership arrangement where the YMCA, with their focus on health and wellness, combined with our effort and that of the library in terms of educational opportunities to work hand in hand along with Atrium, which is a new entity on site as well. So we've said that we can't do this in and of ourselves, that we have to do it in a health equity arrangement. And let me not say too that Nourish Up has certainly played a role in terms of providing foods to the communities that need it. But the long range is that we're doing it from a community economic development perspective, where we are buying and we're seeking to solve the problem that we have been looking for others to do for so long. That's our history, and that's what we're going to do with the Three Sisters Market.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. You you both have mentioned a little bit about like getting food out to like senior homes or senior living, and I know Nourish Up also works with Meals on Wheels. So how do you see these programs impact Black and Brown communities specifically, or just how important is it to make sure you people have to as well?
Well, again, I always like to start with data. I mean, that's one thing that we pride ourselves on at Nourish Up. So, we have our Meals on Wheels program, but we also have 41 pantries throughout the community and our grocery home delivery program. And I love Charlotte, and this is a beautiful Queen City. Uh, but if we think that we don't have a racial inequity problem, then I show my data. I'm like, look no further than who we are serving. So last year, 44% of the 160,000 people that we provided groceries to were Black or African American. 40% were Hispanic or Latino. 7% were white. So again, that looks drastically different than what the demographics of Mecklenburg County is. And so when we look at who is food insecure, it is definitely people of color. And we can do better than that. We also heat map all of our data. So we look at particular zip codes and neighborhoods where we're feeding people. And, there's not a pantry right here. But there's certainly pantries all throughout the crescent of Charlotte. And so we are in neighborhoods where those grocery stores are not and where people don't have regular access to fresh, healthy food.
Let me say that where we sit today in this setting, if you just travel down Wellesley and turn on East Boulevard and West Boulevard are the same arterial, okay? And you can access a multitude of grocery shopping options on the east side. But if you cross the tracks, then it's a different outcome. And so, yes, there's a history there. And you have to ask yourself, how is it that within an area that is less than 3 miles from the central business district, less than 2 miles from the biggest economic generator in the state, the airport, the stadium, and all of this development that is taking place in the South End, how is it that an area like the West Boulevard corridor has no grocery shopping opportunities within it? And so, with that, what we're saying is that we can't, if the 2040 comp plan aspires to create equity within a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute drive, and all of that, how is it that we're still in the same boat that we have been in for the past 40 years? And so when you got these particular issues going on, do you continue to keep trying to push for somebody else to solve your problem? We said we weren't going to do that. And we went after the cooperative market. We went after the urban farm. And we are going after the residents to actually be those that support. And we're doing it in partnership so that when once built, it'll never go away. And it's open to all to shop and enjoy the other amenities there.
And part of that partnership I really want to lift up is really going back to the old adage, teach a man to fish, teach a person to farm, teach them how to grow. Because at the end of the day, we know what happened during COVID. The shelves went empty. And if the shelves are empty and the producers aren't producing, who has to produce? We need to know how to do that for ourselves. So a big part of that educational compass must be a part of that partnership as well.
That's really cool how both of you have mentioned it's really important to fix the problem in-house instead of sourcing it out. So can you please tell us a little bit more about your models and how other people could re they could replicate that model so that all the communities who are struggling with this will be able to do it in-house.
So speaking from the lens of the Rosa Parks Farmers Market, one of the things we pride ourselves in being in partnership with other members, but also a transformational educational market. It is that education that is centered. So we actually have classes where people learn how to grow. We have classes where people learn how to can on site. And we are in partnership with Johnson C. Smith University and the Public Health Department. So we're actually operating where the old A&P on Trade Street was at West Complex. So that in and of itself is significant that people can come out into the community. They can get the education that they need to be sovereign for themselves. So if you have a grow bag and you need to grow some herbs in your house, you can do that. You know how to do it. You think about the soil quality, but you're also supporting our environment, and that's a huge piece. We have to understand how these things are interconnected, because the more we do think about our soil health, the more we're helping the planet. So all of those things are really a part and parcel of what we do. As far as Harvesting Humanity, we recently concluded a year-long project with the Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District. And our intention was to make sure that Title I schools, so schools that typically are not going to get the active gardens because they don't have the people to staff it, we make sure that we stand in that gap. So we were taking young children and really getting them excited about growing in their own schoolyards, growing in their own backyards. And again, that educational piece, I can't say enough, is so critical.
Yes. We, the West Boulevard Neighborhood Coalition, comes at it from a human-centered design perspective. And that means if you've got a problem, do you wait for someone else to fix it? And we've been waiting for so long, and we set forth a community economic development initiative that features food at the forefront, that the people actually work together in partnership with other anchor institutions to solve a long-term community need. And so the Three Sisters Market will be community-owned and community-driven. It'll be professionally run. The cooperative is run by a board of directors and a general manager who's in the room tonight. The young lady standing in the back, Mrs. Janiqua Jackson, uh, a ton of cooperative market experience and working in traditional markets, and it be overseen by a governing board. The coalition actually is the nonprofit developer for the market, in that we're the ones that are building it in partnership with our development team and our construction general managers. And so we will actually own the building. The market will be run by the market board. In that way, the market will never go away.
I'd like to describe our model at Nourish Up. I say that we operate through radical compassion, and it is run by volunteers. So even though we fed 160,000 people, I have less than 50 people on my staff team. Now, granted, those 50 people are truly amazing and they do the work of an army, but it's really 4,000 volunteers that are helping deliver all the food. It is partner agencies that are making the referrals. When I say it takes a village to feed a village, I mean that. And so it is all of those people that come together, because at our core, we believe that food is a basic human right. And our vision is to accept no excuses for our neighbors going hungry. And so anyone who feels that way is welcome to join our army of service. And we roll up our sleeves and we make sure our community is well fed, radically and compassionately.
I think it's important to note too that when we talk about food and food access, food is a social determinant of education, it's a social determinant of health, it's a social determinant of mental health, and it's a social determinant of violence. And it's all of those things that a lack of food access contribute greatly to in the community. And so when we talk about food access, food deserts, and the initiatives that we are putting forth, we are addressing the maladies that exist within the built environment, because housing and jobs and things of that particular nature are associated with this issue that we're seeking to address as well.
Absolutely. Kind of talked about it a little bit, but also how does economic mobility play into food access, and how does your organization or where you work kind of like focus on getting uh the more financial stability to access food?
Economic mobility is the core of the work that we do in our models, in the sense that the market is a marquee issue that we are addressing um, currently, but once built, it's not the only issue that we're seeking to solve. Our community is certainly, because of the area in which we are working in, it's under a high threat of gentrification and things of that nature. And certainly housing price points are rising. One of the things that we're doing, we're working in partnership with an organization called the West Side Community Land Trust, where we're looking to create housing opportunities, whether it be multifamily housing or single family housing and or commercial properties. We're seeking to create affordability in perpetuity so that as housing price points rise and or property tax rises, the the those thresholds stay stable for residents under the land trust model, and therefore we are able to keep people in place. We're also working to attract new businesses that the community wants and needs, because not only are we a food desert, but we are unbanked and there are other needs that we have. So our model looks at the holistic community economic development lens as a way of addressing the economics of the community. Because currently, I'll be totally honest with you, we're a service-oriented economy. There are any number of nonprofit organizations in the community, but we need investment from the larger private sector community, and we're creating an environment by which entrepreneurs and others will see a need to invest to be able to raise the quality of life and mobility for residents that have historically not had those opportunities.
Thank you. I see that you're all really passionate about what you do, and I was just wondering if you could each give us like a success story, a highlight of being in this sector and doing the work that you do.
Well, we had one just this last week, and lots of times I talk about our grocery clients who visit our pantries or get a grocery home delivery, but we had a success just this last week with a Meals on Wheels recipient. So every day, thanks to that brigade of volunteers, we are delivering medically tailored meals to people who want to age in place and they can no longer prepare meals. They're homebound. And so every single day, Monday through Friday, I have this amazing, we call it the double Chick-fil-A line in front of our new Hunter Hub facility. We have volunteers lining up to pick up meals and to deliver routes. Well, we had a volunteer that went to deliver a meal to somebody who was homebound and they did not come to the door. And sometimes they don't come to the door and they might have a doctor's appointment that they're supposed to leave a cooler out. And so when they did not leave a cooler out and they did not come to the door, my volunteer knocked and no one came. And they thought they could hear somebody inside, but they weren't certain. And so they marked that meal as undelivered. Well, Annie, who works in our office, saw that that meal was undelivered and called that volunteer right away and said, wait, why is the meal undelivered? And they said, well, I don't know. They didn't come to the door. We thought we could hear them inside, but we weren't sure. And so Annie did not let it drop there. She called the client. Client did not answer. Called the apartment complex where the client lived. Couldn't get a hold of anybody. Thought there's a 24-hour maintenance line at the apartment complex. Let me call that number. Also called that person's emergency contact. Ultimately, the maintenance person at the apartment building was able to go do a wellness check on that recipient, and they had fallen down and they were unable to get back up. So an ambulance came, checked that person out. They ended up keeping the person overnight in the hospital, and we got a hold of their emergency contact, and their sister said, this is exactly why I signed them up for this program, not just for the food, but so that I would know that they would be safe in their own home. So again, food is medicine, but the reason that our Meals on Wheels program was called Friendship Trays is because sometimes it's more than the food, right? It's that human connection too. And so that's, as we get to hear those success stories all the time, but that's the most recent one that just happened last week.
So I have a ton, but I'd like to lift up one that's in the crowd right here. There are two students that I've had the pleasure of working with that are students here at Queen's University. And one of them I actually first came in contact with doing work at a community garden in the Hidden Valley, Sugar Creek area, sourcing food, harvesting food, planting food. And so I just love her to stand up in the orange. Come on, Miss Sophia. She didn't know I was going to be here today. I wasn't sure if she was going to be here today, but she's still doing this work, right? This food security work is still important to her. And that's a success story in and of itself, because once we can plant those seeds and know those seeds are coming to be harvested, we can say we did our job.
Me? Okay. All right. Let me do it this way. We started our Seeds for Change urban farm in the fall of 2016, and we have 2 growing seasons. And since that particular time, we've had anywhere from 15 to 20 youth that actually come on board each year, and we've been able to sustain that program. And we have the farmers market, and every farmers market event, we've had an increasing number of patrons who've come out and purchased foods from the farmers market for themselves and their families. And more importantly, a lot of times they just come out because they see the youth out there. Okay. And we've had, youth who've had some issues, maybe in the home or things of that particular nature, but it's something about putting your hands to the soil and working and seeing the return. A lot of kids will say, "This has changed me," and I work with the schools and things of that particular nature, work with the library, work with the Y and things of that nature. Those are successes. But I will also say that since we launched the cooperative market, we've been able to date to garner about $5.4 million in funding, and of what will be ultimately a $13.5 million effort. And so we're well on our way to achieving that 13.5 million with a capital campaign, which is definitely in earnest now. But more importantly, we also have a member owner campaign that we just launched recently, and to date, in the last 2 months, we've gone from approximately 25 to 200 members of what will ultimately be a 1,000 member initial member owner goal. That's a success story, and I will say that too, that it is the legacy of those who came before me, those that you see back there that make up the three sisters. Amy Martin James, who started a school in the community. There's a book called Plum Thickets and Field Daisies was written about her, and she was known for her propensity to educate children who other teachers said couldn't learn, and particularly African American males. Coming up in Amy James Elementary School, I certainly learned from the educators who came behind her that though we may have had inferior books, we did not have inferior minds. And so Amy James is a part of that. And then secondly, there's Lucille McNeil, who is my mentor. Who started me on this leadership journey. And I'm a graduate of Lucille McNeil University. And I got undergraduate in grassroots politics, and I took my master's in community economic development. And I continue to walk the walk and talk the talk because that's what she would have wanted. Thirdly, Miss Dorothy Waddy, I preceded her in her passing back in 2015 or 2016, I think it was. She led the coalition. And so it's that type of leadership that I bring, that I follow and I bring to the table. And there are others who are with me. And those are the successes that we have today. And I will say that in this room, we're certainly looking, if you want to be a part of this cooperative movement and this movement to create a solidarity economy, which will actually address a number of issues in communities that have historically been marginalized. This is an opportunity, and we look forward to having you as being a part of that success.
You know, that was a perfect segue. So, it was, what advice would you give to young activists and college students who want to contribute to solving food insecurity? So, yeah.
Well, again, you're more than welcome to join our army. I mean, roll up your sleeves and feed somebody. Get busy. I mean, you've heard some great organizations tonight. Educate yourself. If you have plenty, then you need to share. I think we are so busy protecting what we have that we need to think about the people who have less than us. And you know what? If you're having a bad day, right? I told you at the beginning of this that I thought that feeding people would be depressing. If you think your life is hard, go feed somebody, right? Get your hands dirty in the soil. Feeding people, serving other people feels good. The last bit of advice, because young people, you are our future. We need legislation to change. And guess what? People who are hungry do not have time to be calling their legislators and their lawmakers because they're trying to put food on their table. And so we've been doing this. We've been feeding people for 50 years. And our strategic plan that we developed in just the last couple of years finally includes a pillar for advocacy work. And so we meet with our local representatives, our state representatives, and God help us, our federal representatives, because we have to legislate for the people who don't have enough food to eat. And we have to legislate for them on their behalf. Because again, if you are worried about putting your food around your table, the last thing that you have time to do is to call your senators and congresspeople. So get involved.
My advice would be to fight for the common good. And I say that because we are in an environment where we are being encouraged and motivated to be divided, and divided for reasons of color, of race, of ethnicity, of gender, and things of that particular nature. We can't go backwards. If we are going to solve the problems of today, particularly you young people, we can't go back. We've got to go forward. And I say only through the future, and you represent the future, can we begin to address these maladies of food insecurity, of housing insecurity, and all of those things together. And it's going to take your leadership to stand up and stand forward and speak out if we are to continue to be a united nation and a United States. And I don't take that lightly. I will say this, that one of the classes I took when I was here was American Capitalism. I don't know if, and certainly in that, I learned about the civic republicanism, which talks about addressing the common good, because it is only in the commons where we meet each other and we unite together, that we can solve the problems in which we are talking about tonight, as well as other issues.
Well, I think they said it all, but I'll just round it out by I often tell young people in my life and that I encounter two things. One, that there's a reason that community is spelled the way it is. You and I right beside each other, right? Because we need each other. So I just echo that solidarity. And the same with when we think about wellness and well-being, it starts off with what two letters? WE. We have what it takes. There is an abundance. We are not operating in scarcity, even though they want us to believe that. We have what it takes, and we can do this together.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. We would like to open up the floor for any audience questions.
Two things that I don't know if it's conspicuously missing or if it just wasn't addressed. Number one, I didn't hear anything about funding from Mecklenburg County for any of your organizations, so I don't know if that's something that you get or is just not addressed. And the other one was meals in the schools. I don't know if any of you work with MCS in terms of because I worked in a Title I school for quite a while, and I wouldn't eat the food that they serve. Firstly frozen, thawed out, and then served to these kids.
So absolutely, one of our strongest partners is Mecklenburg County in a number of ways through the Soil and Water District, through the Public Health Department. We actually partner with them on edible landscapes. So we actually put edible landscapes in the back of churches and the back of schools. There are at least 50. We just celebrated our 50th edible landscape build. And so a lot of the work we do is done in partnership and through funding of the county. With that said, we also know that there are a lot of restrictions and stipulations that local government can and cannot do, right? So we do depend on the people. And so it's really important that public and private come together in this work. It's really important that everyone find their way in this work because everyone has a place in this work.
Right. Let me say, before I answer that question of Mecklenburg County funding, I see County Commissioner Arthur Griffin in the room. And I want to say that within my leadership journey, Arthur has certainly been a mentor to me as well, and certainly knows, the journey that we have been on. To your question about funding from Mecklenburg County, yes, we have received funding from Mecklenburg County. Is it enough? That's a different question. and we were also fortunate enough to receive a funding allocation, a congressional sponsorship from Congressperson Alma Adams that really jump-started that contribution from Mecklenburg County, as well as a contribution from the city of Charlotte. That makes up a considerable amount of our funding to date, and we're certainly well on our way to raising the additional capital that we need. And we certainly will circle back to those for additional funding if it is available. There you go, Tim.
Thank you. So we work in collaboration with, again, local government and state government and federal government, but Lucy Mitchell, my Chief Development Officer, sitting right behind you, and Lucy can tell you that a very teeny tiny portion of our budget comes from any government entities. So is it 5% or less of our budget that comes from government entities? So they do certainly support us. And, when the pandemic hit, we also were the lucky recipients of ARPA dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act. And that was a huge blessing at a time that we saw just enormous need. That enormous need continues, and ARPA dollars are on their way out. So Lucy's a very busy woman trying to continue all of our fundraising efforts, but a vast majority comes from the private sector and the faith community, and individuals are our biggest funding source. We do also partner with CMS. I can't speak to the quality of their lunches, but I do know we get referrals from many school teachers and CMS social workers. And when Tim is packing out all of those extra snacks, Our number one source of sharing of snacks is from school teachers who often come by to pick up those extra snacks for their hungry students. So thank you for the question.
Yeah. Thank you all for your comments. Can you all speak a little bit about supporting folks who might have shame around these insecurities and might wait a long time or not seek help at all? Like, what are the ways in which you support those experiencing shame?
I'm so glad that you asked that question. I often get asked as the CEO of this nonprofit what keeps me up at night. And I have always said what keeps me up at night is the person who's too afraid to call. And we do see it. We see it oftentimes. We see seniors that will feed their pets before they'll feed themselves. We see moms go to bed hungry because they are terrified to tell somebody that they don't have enough food to feed their children. Because if I say that, are they going to take my kids away from me? And so the way that we combat that is the best way that we know how, and that's through love and dignity. We believe in client choice. So we try and have as many of our pantry operations and even our grocery home delivery be filled with choice so that they can choose the foods that they want based on what we have available. We'll never be Harris Teeter, Publix, or Food Lion, but we're going to die trying to give people the opportunity to select the foods that their kids like, that they need for their medical conditions. And then, of course, when they come in, we just want to love on them. So we're shopping alongside them, but we also want them to know that there's no shame in asking for help. So it's always our goal that from the moment you call us to when we're loading your trunk full of groceries, that not only are we nourishing your belly, but also your soul and your heart.
One of the most effective ways I found is to break bread with them. So oftentimes at the market, or pretty much every market, we will have samples and we will have food and it warms my heart. There's an unhoused neighbor who comes every week, and when we have samples, she eats. And one day she gave me a gift bag, and it had bars of soap and $1. And I mean, the tears fell because when someone knows that you can sit beside them and share a meal and share a good word, the shame falls away because we become two human beings together. And so that's always been something for me. It's comfort to break bread with someone.
I think the way in which we address the issue of shame is by raising the needs of the community and doing it within a collective community standpoint. We know that, of course, there are attacks on nutrition programs, there are attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, there are attacks on housing support and subsidy and assistance. And we certainly see ourselves as standing in the vanguard, so to speak, at the forefront to address the needs of our community. And we do it unabashedly. We do it from the standpoint of addressing the social and economic mobility needs of the community. One of the ways in which we bring it to the forefront is by seeking to educate the traditional markets, particularly around the use of food subsidy and assistance. We bring it to the forefront by saying that this is unaccounted for income that is particularly available there that would make an initiative like the cooperative market financially successful. All of us have to eat. All of us have to sleep. All of us have to have a roof over our heads. And we have health and wellness needs. And by bringing it to the forefront in a collective way, then we see ourselves as addressing the mobility issues that affect the residents in our area.
Okay, so I have a question for you all. First, thank you all so much for being here. I really enjoyed every tidbit of information that you all shared. And I know this was touched on a bit briefly before, but I want us to kind of dive a bit more into this point about economic mobility and disparity. I am a Charlotte native. I grew up on Batersford Road, Freedom Drive, Wilkinson Boulevard. So I have an intimate understanding of what this looks like within our communities and this food insecurity. So, can you guys talk a bit more about how economic disparity kind of perpetuates onto food insecurity? Where, for example, someone can come to a Nourish Up food pantry and you're getting all these groceries, but if you do not have stable and secure housing, you may not even have some place to cook these meals or where to store this food. So, what does that look like? And what resources do your organizations provide to kind of help alleviate that?
That's a great question. I will tell you, I am really glad I'm just the food lady because, like Eboné said, we live in an environment of abundance. So we produce enough food here in the United States to feed absolutely everybody. Housing is a different issue. But we do experience at Nourish Up that rent often eats first. And so what we try and do is we also have social service coordinators on staff at Nourish Up because typically if somebody comes to us hungry, that's just a symptom of a much bigger problem. And while we're the food experts, we're not the housing experts. We're not the employment experts. But you know what? We have partner agencies. So if they have a medical issue, we can make a referral and get them over to one of our medical partners. If they need rent and utility assistance, we can get them connected to our friends at Crisis Assistance Ministry. If it's an employment issue, we can connect them to Goodwill. And so I like to call it the baton pass. So let's take care of your food issue, whether you need groceries or meals, and then let's do a solid baton pass to another organization or another entity that can help you so that we don't want to become your primary grocery store, right? We want to offer a hand up instead of a hand out. But the only way that we can do that is if we solidly baton pass people to the other resources that they need. But since you asked this, I do want to address this because I also meet with a lot of donors. And a lot of donors and people who are of affluence don't understand what it's like to be hungry, and they worry about all those people that take advantage. Okay, I do hear this, and I get this question often. And so again, data is my friend. We allow our grocery clients to visit us up to 12 times in any rolling calendar year. The vast majority of our clients come 3 times or less. And so even though they're allowed to come up to 12 times, people don't want to be shopping at my food pantries as amazing as they are. They want to be back up on their own feet. They want to be shopping at their local grocery stores. And so we don't routinely see people taking advantage because we do a good job of helping them up and getting them connected to other resources.
And that's also another one of my students. Brilliant young lady. So one of the things I will say is that when we think about economic mobility, even here in Charlotte, we got to think there are teachers who are food insecure. Let me say that again. There are teachers, educational practitioners who are food insecure in this city. And so one of the things that goes back to what Tina said, we have to actively lobby. We have to actively fight the legislation that will keep someone at an economic position that will not allow them to be able to feed their families. And that's as important as all of the things that we do, going to make sure that, we have living wages in this city and in this county. And I think that's something that we can all contribute to.
I just have a question. So, as somebody who is like really passionate about this entire topic and who wants to pursue like creating a nonprofit specifically focusing on ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences like that contribute to all of these issues that you guys are talking about. Um, like where do I start? Do I start with those connections? Do I start with like, rolling my sleeves up volunteering, which is something I do now?
I, I would say reconsider starting another nonprofit. Think about the nonprofits who already focus on trauma informed care across the systems and find out how do you support them in standing up stronger. Because one of the things I would say is we have a nonprofit industrial complex. If nobody's saying that, we have more nonprofits and still more work, much more work to be done.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. Thank you, Ebony. I was going to say, don't start a nonprofit. Come join us. We got work for you to do. All right?
Can I actually turn that over to our presenters? Because I think you might have an excellent place to start, right? Like our two presenters here. I don't want to blow your secret, but what are you doing right now?
Yeah. So Olivia was a past one, but I'm a current intern at Nourish Up. And they absolutely love to have us. And it's a great experience because you not only are like front lines doing it, but you're also learning everything on the other side. So you get to like understand what actually goes through it all and where your time can go. And also the hunger challenge on Queens campus. We do it every fall semester, and it was something that we were trying to like have every year. Because like we said in the beginning, food insecurity is something that happens on college campuses as well. So something we can do here in our small communities to uplift it. So yeah.
So thank you so much, Eboné, Rickey, and Tina for coming out and speaking to us.